these families are completely, they will never be the same again. They will never be the same again. And yet, on top of all of that, our society has created a stigma that they can't speak.
Hi, I'm Lance, and this is UNSILENT, a speak series by No Stigmas that champions mental health advocacy and challenges the stigmas that all too often prevent people from getting the help they need. We're so glad you're here. And in today's second part of our two-part conversation with South African filmmaker Odette, we continue to talk about the impact that she makes as a filmmaker and a mental health advocate. We continue to dive into ways that we can strip away these stigmas, and she ultimately reminds us again and again and again that we are enough. We thank Odette again so much for talking with us. We know these conversations can sometimes be very difficult to have, but we thank her for her honesty and her vulnerability. All right, let's dive in. Today's episode contains in-depth conversations around suicide, suicidal ideation, and suicide loss. It's okay if you need to skip this one. Do what's right for you.
I think our fundamental need as a human, if I look at my babies when they were small, that interaction, we need to be seen, we need to be heard, and we need to listen. And I think that we're so distracted, disconnected, we're so many other things that a lot of the time we're missing. When we talk about the warning signs, we miss so much. But, then I spoke to someone the other day, and the lady was gardening. And she came inside and her husband had hung himself, okay? There were no warning signs. She lived with this man. She did not see anything. There were no red flags. She did not see anything. So it is such a difficult thing. As a society, I don't know what to say to us apart from the fact that we need to be connecting more. We need to connect to ourselves, and we need to connect to our belief system. Whatever our belief, I'm not saying be religious. I'm just saying a belief system. Because what is faith? Faith is that I'm not alone. Faith is it's going to be okay. Okay? That's faith. So whatever we believe, whatever structure or system or whatever it is that we need to be believing that actually, you know what? I'm okay. And some sort of faith system in something. Gratitude is a very, very important thing. I don't think we thank ourselves and where we are enough, I mean, I hear the birds singing and I'm like, oh, thank you for singing, wow, you're amazing. And I think that shifts something also. It makes it, some people see me as a very optimistic person, but they actually don't know really what I go through. And that's the thing, because here I'm saying, I think maybe that's why I keep saying, don't keep focusing on the prevention, on these warning signs, because somebody like me, I don't talk about how I feel generally to people, but I don't talk about how I feel for so many reasons. And one of them is that I'm very, very private. So, we are so complex and I mean, I've been to see, since I was 28, I'm 53, I've been to see many, many, many therapists in my lifetime. And some were a complete and utter waste of time, I have to tell you. And there have been two that have been absolutely amazing. And actually what the amazing part of it for me was that I was listening to myself speak. That actually putting the pieces of the puzzle I could do myself by hearing my thoughts. And that's a very powerful thing. So for somebody who may be aware that their friend or their partner or whatever is in this dark space, I think if we can just try and listen. Because when that person starts to speak, I know when I actually start to talk about how I really feel, it's not as bad as I thought it was. And, it's not that it's not as bad, but I can start to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And by getting it out, it makes things feel a lot easier. I have my way. I have my ways of dealing with it. And I don't think everybody has, everybody has their own way definitely for me, one of the things is I need to walk. When I am feeling extremely upset about something, if I walk, It definitely helps me a lot. I live by the sea. I sit and I look at the sea a lot. To be quite honest, it's what got me through lockdown and through the making of this film. When I'm too much, I go and sit and I look at the sea and I breathe. And in the film, we talk about breath and the power of breath. You know, if we just stop and just deep breathing in, hold the breath and let it out and to count of 3 or 4 and just focus on those numbers, it can really shift. I mean, they talk about physiologically, how the body changes through the power of breath. So, you know, as I'm saying, there is no magic wand to this thing of this darkness that we can find ourselves in. And for those who don't have it, then you can just be extremely grateful that you don't have that experience. But to try to understand someone else is just to listen. That's all. All you have to do is listen. And you can't be there to fix anybody's problems, except you can listen. I think that's where the bottom line is, and again, it goes down to connection. Well, and you know, as the rate of suicide is going up and we're starting to see more and more statistics coming in, we're seeing that the police and doctors and nurses are really, really struggling. I mean, they are really struggling. And I think that again, it's back down to a support system. Where is the support system? You know, and when I was talking to this person from the paramedics, we're talking about how we can show this film to them so that we can have these conversations and we can talk. And then she turned around to me and she said, but this may be too triggering for them. So I'm not so sure if they should see it. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. We can't keep running away. We've got to have these conversations. You know, it's really it's this vicious cycle, and it's like, yes, the film is triggering, but you know what? What we want to make sure is that people have a support network before they sit down and watch the film. We're not putting it on YouTube, okay? So they've got some sort of support network, that they've got access to numbers if they need it, that after the film, if they're triggered. But you know what? We can't just keep turning away and saying, no, we can't deal with this. And that's one of the things that I found about during the process and afterwards now of the film, is that some people, when they find out what I'm doing, they just completely don't want to talk about it. Like, it's just not something that their response is, you know what, I don't think we need to be talking about these things. And I think what we need to be doing is we need to be talking about these things, and it is going to upset us and it is going to trigger us. It is, you know, we keep using the word trigger. What is it? I mean, you know, it's going to resonate with us. We're going to relate to the stories, but you know, it's also going to give us a lot of unanswered questions. We hope it's going to, a lot of people are saying that there are, you know, things that they had thought before, they now realize they're not alone in it, or, you know, something helped them in some way through the film. And yes, it is very emotional. Of course it is. We're talking about people who don't want to, who think that to end their pain is to end their life. Of course, it's tragic. And that's why we've made the film. Where are we in our society that this is happening? So Ellen is talking about the loss of her mother, and she goes into great depth about how her mother had planned it for 4 years. Okay. And she talks about the stigma, and she says this is not a reflection on you. This is not a reflection on who you are and what you think. The fact that your loved one, her mother, who she was extremely close to, the fact that her mother died by suicide is not a reflection on her, i.e., she doesn't take the blame. And I think that's one of the main things about the stigma of suicide, whether it's a suicide attempt or whether it's someone who's died by, you know, the loss of someone by suicide. The stigma is the blame, the responsibility. If we can not take the responsibility, I think it's going to help us to be able to listen. I think it's that, again, that vicious cycle of I'm to blame or I'm to fix it. I think it's just I'm to be there and to listen. I think that's the best we can do. I mean, I hear, unfortunately, from when I wake up until I go to bed at night, all I'm doing is reading and seeing posts about people who've lost their loved ones to suicide. It is hectic and it is extremely traumatic. These families are completely, they will never be the same again. They will never be the same again. And yet, on top of all of that, our society has created a stigma that they can't speak. So not only are they experiencing this horrendous trauma, but they also feel that society is pointing a finger at them. And it's a lot in our film. We talk about this a lot. That, was I a bad mother? Wasn't I not a good enough wife? Was I not, these are these constant patterns of thought that go through the stigma of, was I to blame? Am I to blame? Why did I miss the signs, etc., etc. And compounded is society going, we don't really want to talk about those things. And on top of that was, didn't you see the warning signs? And I think it's just, it's the saddest thing. And until we can stop this, until we can actually try to understand the other person. And again, I go back to connection. If we're connecting with someone, that means that we are not going to be putting in all our prejudices, etc. Connection is about listening and about being able to speak without judgment on both sides. And I think if we can encourage our families and our loved ones to do that, I think we are going to be, what we've realized during these last couple of years, 3 years now, however many it's been through this lockdown and pandemic, is that we've become more and more and more isolated. And I think that is a major, major problem. I think when people are about to take that snap, it's that complete isolation, that complete withdrawal, disconnect, dissociation, whatever the words we want to use for it. It's that space of I am alone. And the thing is, even though we think we are alone, we're not. That's the irony. We're actually not. There is somebody out there that cares. And I think if we could make some sort of agreement amongst our close network that if you're feeling like this, promise me you're going to call me. I'm not going to fix it. I'm not going to do anything, but listen, promise me you'll do that. Why is this so important to be having this conversation on suicide? And I've gone through a whole lot of them, but I will just say one thing, that in the States, the statistics are that 65% of people who have lost someone by suicide are more likely to attempt. Now, that is a very large member of our communities, a large group in our communities that are not talking because of stigma, right? Okay, so I think if you're a mental health worker and you're listening to this, or psychiatrist, psychologist, social worker, etc., we need to be really looking at the people who we should be addressing are the people who are struggling with the stigma first and foremost. And by doing that, it's by having these conversations. Doesn't matter what the emotion is, if it's grief or whatever it is the allowing. It's the allowing of that emotion. I think we have been taught and conditioned to not allow that process, and I think that's why we need to, as a society, we need to be talking about what are we as a human? What are we? How do we interpret things? How do we understand things? How do we feel? We talk a lot in the film about the feeling of depression. What does that feel like? We talk a lot about what is anxiety? How do you feel when you are anxious? What are your mannerisms when you are anxious? And then, why are we not able to have these kind of conversations from little with our children, so that they understand that these are the normal processes of our humanity and of our nature? And you are enough, because the last story in our film is Daryl, and Daryl is a suicide survivor. Okay, Daryl jumped in front of a train, and I said to him, when you are on the platform, what is something that my question was, what could you have told yourself made a difference, okay? And he said, I could have told myself, I am enough. I am enough. And I think that is something we need to be telling ourselves every day, a trillion times a day. I am enough. I'm okay and I am enough. Because we keep trying to tell ourselves, I'm not. I'm this, I'm that, I'm wrong, I'm too fat, I'm too thin, I'm too this, I'm too that, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough. And, you know, like I said, there's no magic wand on this conversation, right? There's no, but I mean, we've gone into so many subjects, into such great depth. But I think at the bottom is of all of this is how we are about ourselves before anyone else. How are we with ourselves? You know, we have to reconnect with ourselves, and we have to be telling ourselves some really good things, because the one voice we're going to hear all our lives is our own. And if it's telling us really bad things, and if it's telling us we're not good enough, and I'm not this and I'm not that, then it's not going to be a healthy, happy life within our body. So, you know, that's one thing I think we really need to be doing more, is telling ourselves much better things than what we are telling ourselves.
To go beyond the show, be sure to connect with us on all social media platforms at No Stigmas, and you can always reach out at nostigmas.org to connect with us and see how we can team up together to champion mental health equity for all. Remember, to break these stigmas, we must be unsilent. We'll see you next time.